Saudi Arabia has finally managed to bypass the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz by Iran, and the Saudis are trying to restore pre-war oil supply volumes to the market in record time. The important Saudi East-West pipeline, which allows bypassing the Strait of Hormuz, is now pumping 7 million barrels of oil daily. This is the maximum allowable level for this pipeline. But the Saudis have another route for exporting oil. At the same time, the Financial Times writes that it was Iran's aggression that brought the Gulf countries closer together, and after the war we might not even recognize the region. The monarchies are finally taking action. Well, for example, Iranian media recently, for some reason, complained that the United Arab Emirates, can you imagine, froze Iranian assets worth about $530 billion. And they cancelled the residence permits for absolutely all Iranian citizens, including the so-called golden visas. Iranians are somehow surprised, asking, "But what for? Why are you taking away our residence permits and freezing our assets?" My name is Alexei Pichi. Let's discuss this topic together, but before we start, please subscribe to this channel, give it a like, and leave any comment under this episode. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel and consider the information here important, you can do this with any donation, paid subscription, or sponsorship. All links and details are in the description of this video or in the pinned comment below this episode. Also, subscribe to my Telegram channel Peachy News. The link is in the description of this video. So, Saudi Arabia found a way out and bypassed the blockade of the Hormuz Strait by Iran and is releasing a large volume of oil onto the market. Oil and gas are extremely important for Saudi Arabia. The oil pipeline connecting the east and west and bypassing the Hormuz Strait is now operating at full capacity, pumping oil at a volume of 7 million barrels per day. Here's what Bloomberg says about this. This technical breakthrough is the culmination of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia's years-long action plan to ensure uninterrupted oil supplies after the effective closure of the main export route. Fleets of tankers were redirected to the port of Yanbu on the Red Sea to collect oil, providing an important supply line for the global market. It is known that crude oil exports through Yanbu have now reached about 5 million barrels per day, and the kingdom also exports between 700,000 and 900,000 barrels of petroleum products per day. Out of the 7 million barrels per day passing through Saudi Arabia recently, both Crimea and Europe have been exchanging oil. Recently, millions of barrels per day have been exchanged. Arabia, Europe, Saudi Arabia, Crimea, millions of barrels are being exchanged. Arabia, recently, Crimea, Europe, oil is included in the recent exchanges. Saudi Arabia, Crimea, Europe. 7 million barrels per day pass through Saudi Arabia, and recently, both are involved in the exchange. Oil from millions of barrels passes through Saudi Arabia. Both Crimea and oil are part of the exchange. Out of the barrels passing through, millions of barrels pass through Arabia, and recently, oil in Europe is included in the exchange. It is processed into fuel for Ukraine. So we were the first to secure uninterrupted diesel supplies from the kingdom, while Hungary and Slovakia, as you know, are blocking deliveries through their territory. Although it should be noted that the route through Yanbu only partially compensates for the reduction in supplies due to the closure of the Hormuz Strait, through which about 15 million barrels of oil per day passed before the war. But this bypass route is one of the reasons why oil prices have not reached the crisis highs seen during previous supply shocks. After the Yemeni Houthis announced their entry into the war, concerns for the oil market will be related to the possibility that the Red Sea could become a new front in the conflict. Although the Houthis had not previously indicated that they would attack tankers passing through the Red Sea and the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, they have nevertheless issued threats. Saudi Arabia, which has historically played the role of the world's largest oil supplier and enjoys a reputation as a reliable partner, has been preparing for the worst-case scenario for decades, that is, the closure of the Hormuz Strait. And as it turned out, Saudi Arabia put its emergency action plan into effect. A few hours after the first strikes by the US and Israel on Iran, Saudi Arabia began increasing shipments from east to west and has continued to do so since then. And this pipeline, running across the entire Arabian Peninsula from the vast oil fields in eastern Saudi Arabia to the industrial port city of Yanbu, is more than 1,200 kilometers long. And by the way, it is, let's say, a byproduct of the previous conflict. This was the Iran-Iraq War of the 1980s, during which there were violations and attacks on ships in the Strait of Hormuz. And then the Saudis realized that it's better to have an alternative and not depend solely on the Strait of Hormuz. So they went ahead and built an oil pipeline across the entire country. But there are still concerns that the Yemeni Houthis could attack the port of Yanbu or block the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. And then it looks like the Saudis will be forced to cut oil exports again, because the Red Sea will also become unsafe. That's not the case, as the Saudis are also prepared for this scenario. If exports from Yanbu are disrupted, Saudi Arabia can redirect oil supplies through the Egyptian-assumed pipeline from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean. In general, the Saudis have long understood who their neighbors are and were prepared for such a scenario. And on this matter, the Financial Times reports that over the past month, the leaders of the Gulf countries have been shocked by the scale and audacity of Iran's attacks on even mediators such as Qatar and Oman, its strikes on Dubai's financial center, and its willingness to undermine the rapprochement process with Saudi Arabia. And this has united the monarchies of the Persian Gulf. But the Gulf countries are also disappointed with the US and their actions. The governments of the Persian Gulf countries may, of course, disagree on whether the US should quickly wind down the war or continue it until Iran no longer poses a threat. But all of them will probably strengthen their defenses even more after the war. This is already obvious. This is because a painful strategic reality is emerging. No matter how angry and disappointed they are, their security still depends on partners for whom they feel a certain dislike. Tehran's success in striking targets in the Persian Gulf could actually become critical. It could be a catalyst for most of these countries to deepen their security ties with each other, with the US, and even discreetly with Israel. So it's obvious that the same monarchies of Saudi Arabia and the Emirates understand perfectly well that, look, Israel is becoming something of a new security hub. Therefore, they will have to reach a certain agreement with it. Experts are confident that as a result of this war, the Gulf countries will want to produce weapons themselves, and here the US and Israeli technologies will help. And the EU can be an important partner, but internal disagreements will always limit its role. Pakistan can serve as an alternative arms supplier, but this creates compatibility issues and means greater dependence on China. Ukraine, by the way, can continue to help the Gulf countries with counter-drone capabilities. And here we got involved in this cooperation at just the right time. The current reality should prompt the Gulf countries after the war ends to reconsider their approach and create a more powerful integrated regional defense system that relies on interconnected sensors, interception systems, and coordinated planning. And here Ukraine should actively implement its own defense approaches and convince the Gulf monarchies that, in this situation with the Russians, they should not have any dealings with them at all. In addition, this war reinforces another unpleasant truth for the leaders of the Gulf countries. When missiles and drones strike their territory, China is nowhere to be seen. So it's worth considering if they should keep deepening their ties with them. So why deepen ties with Russia and China in this situation? Does anyone see these two countries helping the Persian Gulf states in any way? No. I'll leave it at that. Your opinion, your opinion. Share your conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. Subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pechi News. The link is in the description of this video. And if you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so by donating or getting a paid subscription using the links and details in the video description or by scanning the QR code on your screen. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.